Hi, this is Patricia McLinn, your host for Authors Love Readers podcast. As you know, we record a lot more content than can ever make it into the episode. I ask more questions than the guests can answer in a compact time frame. So our editors save these extra conversations that don't fit into the regular show. So I hope you enjoy it. In this extra episode, we're going to be talking with authors Paty Jager and Julianne MacLean. We'll hear excerpts from our conversations with each of these wonderful writers. And though we talk about different things, there is a thread that ties them together. And that's how our stories can surprise the writer. And that's a good thing. First up is a conversation with Paty. We talk about routine, probably Paty more than me because I'm not big on routine, but also how writers can keep motivating by letting their stories take them in new and surprising directions. Do you celebrate at any point in the books? Because you've written quite a few. Are you still to the point where you celebrate whatever, beginning, finishing, publishing?
Probably publishing. It's just that I'm excited it's over and done with, but now they got to do all the promotion.
Yeah.
But I don't really have I just kind of do a book, I finish it, I put it out there, do the promotion, move on to the next book. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of become just kind of a keep moving type of thing, conveyor belt. Let's get this one done because this story's knocking at the door to be done, and this one wants to be done. And I usually have 2 or 3 next books already in my head when I'm writing one. So I'm always have something new and exciting I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm not sure that readers understand what nags the characters can be.
Right.
And they're not patient.
Right.
They want their turn now. So, okay, a reader asks us, what is your favorite place to write and why? And she wants to know if it does it have an inspirational view, which I think is so kind. That I think she's wishing us an inspirational view.
Yeah. Well, I prefer to sit here at my desk because it's like treating it like work. This is where I sit. This is where my mind goes into my books and where I need to be focused. But it does have a view straight out the window in front of my desk, and I have there's a hill that's behind our house, and sometimes there are deer that come down. Sometimes there's quail. So yeah, it's very inspirational.
Cool. Now you said you treat it as work. We know it's a business. It has to be a business for most of us to be able to keep writing.
Right.
Do you have a routine? Do you follow do you work Monday through Friday, take the weekends off? Do you work at a certain time of day?
It's kind of, I like to do at least 3,000 words a day. So I like to have 15,000 words a week. So it just depends. If I have to go to the store on Monday, then I'll probably write on Saturday. Or if I get to Saturday and I haven't got to 15,000 words, I'm going to write Saturday. So it's just kind of, I usually sit down every day unless we go somewhere and try to get some writing done. Here lately, I've got a new series that's starting in January, and I've been trying to get those books done so I can put teaser chapters in the back of the next one, the first one. And then I've been trying to get another Chandra High Eagle book will be coming out the 1st of January, which introduces the character in the new series. So I've been trying to get all that put together, and a blog tour and promotion. And so I have been having trouble finding the writing time lately.
It's hard to balance those things. I totally understand. And all those writing related, but not actually writing
Right.
events and activities and you have to do them.
Yes.
Do you have any issue that 3,000 words a day is a good amount of words? Do you have issues at all, like with your hands or your wrists, as many of us do?
Sometimes it I have to wear the braces at night when I sleep, but
Mhm.
not every night.
Mhm.
It's just when it bothers me. But it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem to bother me too bad. But just once in a while,
Oh, good.
well, I think it's more the farm work than the writing.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah. Well, yeah, I actually have one on right now, the Velcro wrist
Hmm.
wraps that and they do help. Um, but it's, for me, it's been decades on computers, so they my
Right.
wrists are pretty much shot. So this question is probably the question is probably going to reveal more about me than the answer does about you. But you said you like the part where you're creating the world and the characters and putting that all together, and you do that at the beginning, and you have that. You said you sort of have this um, uh, information for you before you start writing. So my question is, if you already have that, and that's the satisfying part, why do you write?
Because I know who they are and where they're starting, but I don't know where the adventure's going to take them. So the
Okay,
writing is
okay.
taking them on the adventure of the story. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're not doing an outline of the whole story.
No, 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 no. I am not an outliner.
Okay,
No.
okay,
I just get a
okay.
feel for them. I just get a feel for them and the main characters in the story, and I just figure out where I want it to start. And then, a murder mystery, you gotta figure out who did it. So basically your storyline is set. You just fill in all the adventure in there, everything that happens.
Well, I don't always know who did it. I often don't know who did it until and when I think I do, they turn out not to have done it because they died.
Well, I usually pick somebody at the beginning. I think, "Oh, it should be this person," but there's only been 1 book out of 12 that has ended up being that person at the end. Bec
Isn't that interesting? But you feel you need to be going towards something
Right, yeah.
in picking that. Okay. Ah, that's interesting. Did it scare the bejeebers out of you the first time it happened when you thought it was gonna be
Yes, I thought I'd messed up
Henry
the
and it
book.
turned out to be so how did you realize you hadn't messed up the
When I
book?
went back and found I'd already dropped all the clues in without even thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So then it's like, "Oh, well, I
Okay.
knew all
Yeah.
along, I just didn't I knew, but I didn't know." It was kinda so now I just let it go. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
when it ends up being somebody else, okay, the clues are probably there, and I go back and look, and they are.
Oh, that's terrific. So, you also mentioned, learning new things as you're writing, and that's the research. Um, how do you research and when in the process do you research?
Well, if it was all in perfect world, I would have it all researched before I start. But as we all know, as you're going along, you write something in and it's like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. I guess I better go find out."
Mhm.
So I try to get as much
Yep.
as I can ahead of time, but there's always stuff comes up that I have to go, research and see if I'm using it correctly or writing about it correctly or whatever.
What's some really fun research you've done?
Well, the latest is my new series is the um, main protagonist is a fish and game warden in the county where I grew up. And so went on a ride with one of the um, Fish and Wildlife state troopers for a day to learn what they do, how they
Oh,
do it,
cool.
what all the kinds of stuff they come across. And so that was really fun. I had a really good time. that day. Some of the other has been, I've got my Chandra Heigl character, her family lives on the Colville Reservation in Washington. And I actually have a writer friend who lives on the reservation. And so when I set my stories up there, I run them by her and she tells me yes, no, change this, fix that. But she took me on a tour of the reservation at the beginning of the series. So it's just getting to know different people, different um, occupations, and in the historical ones, I just love all the history I come across.
Mm-hmm. And what a great source your friend at the reservation is. That's cool.
Yes.
How about among all the books you've written, and you have your very loyal fans, are there any that even those loyal fans may have overlooked somewhat? Like I call these hidden gems.
Yeah, I've got one. I call it Improper Pinkerton. That's a
Hmm.
historical Western. It started out, I wanted it to be kind of a historical mystery series type of thing. Um, but it didn't take off. So it's just one book, and it's Improper Pinkerton, and it's about a female Pinkerton agent.
Uh-huh.
Just kind of her, oh, she's just very spunky. Let's put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
I just really loved writing that story and her, and I was kind of hoping to keep it going, but yeah, it didn't take off. So it's just a standalone, but I think it's one of my hidden gems.
Well, and you might come back to it. When and
Yeah.
where is it set?
It's actually set in Montana around Helena
Mm.
in the 1880s, 1880s, 1890s, somewhere around there.
See,
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people would love to read that. So,
But she's pretending to be a prostitute to get information from a guy. So it's yeah. And then another Pinkerton shows up and doesn't know she's a Pinkerton, and yeah, it's just comical and fun.
that sounds terrific. Next, I'm looking forward to you hearing parts of the conversation I had with Julianne MacLean that we didn't previously have an opportunity to share with you. It's about research and about how the idea for a story begins, and again, how stories can take the writer by surprise. You would think since we create it, it wouldn't, but it does. Now, I want to go back to you mentioned you've been in London for a year. Did you find that changed your writing routine or how you viewed things?
It didn't change my routine in terms of the amount of time, like, waking up in the morning and when I would do my writing and that kind of thing. But I was able to do research. It was so nice to be in the world where the book was set and see it, because so often the research that I do, if I'm writing about a place that I've never been, which has happened, certainly no one's ever been to Regency England, right? So
when you go to Bath, it feels sort of like it, doesn't it?
yes, it does. That's true. A lot of the architecture is still the same, but it was just, I don't know. I ended up the last part of the book, the characters where they live is basically in my apartment building, my flat where I live now. And I was like, well, where are they going to live? And I was going to think, well, I'll have them live in Chelsea and I'll go research that. And then I'm like, am I nuts? Like, I know it. And it's like, it would be so easy. And it was so easy to write. And it was such a pleasure to write about something that it just felt so real to me because I was living it. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable writing experience, I must say, just because of that, like being here. Yeah.
So when you're usually dealing with a book, where in the process are you doing the research? Do you do it beforehand? Sounds like you do it during also.
I do both. I do it beforehand. The research also contributes to the plot. Like I'll come up with a little kernel of an idea. Like that's in this particular book, I decided I was going to write stuff about the London Blitz, which was the bombing that happened in London during World War II. And I knew I was going to make it a dual timeline but I didn't know who the characters were. But I just knew that they were going to be around. The Blitz was going to be happening. So then I start researching the Blitz, and that just leads me. It's like one thing leads you to another, and then the storyline. I figured out the plot line because of the research that I was doing and all the research books that I was reading. And I had some ideas at first. I thought, okay, there's going to be a love triangle, and there's going to be a firefighter and then there's going to be a pilot. And then it ended up, there was no firefighter, but there was a pilot, but then there was other stuff. And like, I think I spent 3 months reading and researching before I finally figured out the plot. Like, it took me 3 months to figure out what the plot was. And then I started writing. And once I did start writing, I would have to pause and read a research book. Like, after, on chapter 4, when I'm entering into a certain section where a bunch of stuff happens, I would set aside a few days and just read something so that I could write the next part. I was always doing that throughout the whole book. So yeah, I would, and then when I do research, I always buy print books for my research material and keep it on my shelf, and I mark up my books. I'm a big one for highlighting and writing in the margins and circling stuff. And so when someday when I'm gone, if someone inherits my library, they're not going to be able to do anything with it because all the books have pencil marks inside them and I've written inside them. So taking notes. And I'll refer to the books. Like, I'll know that I read about a certain research something in whatever book, and I know it's on my shelf, and I can pull it out and find that information later when I need it. So I'm researching the whole time. Yeah.
One of the questions one of our readers asks is where we get our ideas from, and you talked about where, from the initial idea, how it evolved and changed, and but can you trace back where that very initial idea came from?
Yes, for this particular book. And I usually can for most other books too. And it usually starts with one little tiny seed. And I remember the moment, and I went to see a play in London our first week here, and it was An American in Paris. It was a musical. And yeah, great play. And all along, I was resisting the idea of doing anything World War II because I felt like I don't like to write to trends, and it's very popular. The World War II setting is very popular in publishing right now. And just because of that, I was resisting it. I'm like, no, it's too popular, and I don't want to write to a trend. So I was resisting it. And then we had gone to the Winston Churchill War Museum, which is the bunker where he was, that was in the movie Darkest Hour. We went to visit that during the day, and then that night we went to see An American in Paris. And as I was sitting in the theater, there's a scene, and it's the play is set after World War II, and the characters are kind of traumatized from the war. And there's this one brief moment where a car backfires in the street, and they all jump, and like one of them practically dives under a table. And I knew it was because they had all been through the bombings of the London Blitz. And in Paris, well, Paris didn't get bombed, but these characters had come from London. So anyway, and that was the moment I went, London Blitz. And I was just like, I'm going to write about the London Blitz. And that's how it started. And then, yeah, so it was exactly that moment where I finally just said, okay, I'm going to do World War II. And it was just because of that car backfiring during that play. So, yeah.
That's cool. That's really interesting. I've talked some before. My dad was in World War II. And then he also, and there are lots of stories involved with that, but he, after the war, went to some reunions, well after the war, of 2nd Armored Division. And they had one near where I was living in D.C. one time, and so I went for part of a day. And I have such a vivid memory of this. My dad had taken motion pictures in the area of the Battle of the Bulge, not during the Battle of the Bulge because he was otherwise occupied.
Yeah.
But, and they had these huge trees, all snow laden, and the men were walking, and they had like blankets wrapped around their heads, and some of them had blankets wrapped around their feet because they were just freezing. And I'd seen the movies before, and I could look out into the audience, and here were these men 50 years later, unconsciously shivering. because the visual brought back that memory so strongly of what they'd gone through. And I will never forget that moment of seeing that.
Wow.
We've talked now and then about readers, and what sort of interaction do you have with readers? Have you had any interactions that have really stood out to you in person or letters?
Yeah, I mean, every letter that I get, it just makes my day. It touches my heart. So I love, I try to respond to every letter that I get, and I love getting emails from readers. But one time I had a reader who read my historical romances, and she made a needlepoint, like an embroidery, beautiful, of one of my characters. It was this woman in a Victorian gown, and she sent it to me by FedEx in a big frame with glass on it and everything. I hung it in my dining room. It was beautiful, and I couldn't believe it. And she had a little note on the back of it saying how much my books had meant to her, and that was really special. I still can't believe that she did that. So it was really beautiful. So I think that gets the top prize.
Yeah. Now I'm jumping around here, but have you had stories that have surprised you? That what you thought they were going to be at the beginning, and if so, share with us which stories.
Yeah. Well, once, I guess something that I've started doing when I write books now is having a twist, like some sort of twist in the plot that's unexpected. And that started with Captured by the Highlander. And I have to credit Deborah Hale with this. You know Deborah Hale.
Yes.
And a very good friend. And we were having coffee one day, and I had most of my book plotted. And we were brainstorming, and we got through the plot, and then she and I was like, well, I didn't know how it was going to end. That was it. And she just threw something out there that gave me this ultimate plot twist that just was awesome. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to use that. It started me that every book after that, I've looked for the twist. So when I'm plotting, I'm like, but where's the twist? So I always try to come up with something myself for every book. There's going to be something that the reader's not going to see coming, and it's going to flip things. And so basically I take you down the road, and then I take a sharp right turn, and it's sort of become something that I need to do for my books. Like when I'm plotting, and I try to steer away from the obvious, I guess. And that started with that plot twist that Deb and I had come up with. It was Deb that came up with it. And it's just sort of every book since, I've made sure that there's some kind of twist in the plot.
That's all for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you will join us for the next episode. In the meantime, I'm wishing you lots of happy reading.